Scream is one of the best horror franchises in all of horror. I was aware of these movies from a very young age as my dad had the VHS of the first film back in 1998, and me being 3 years old at the time, the cover was kind of creepy, and I thought the movie looked very unpleasant. Flash forward to today, and Scream is my favorite horror movie franchise. I started watching these movies when I was 12 years old, and I have some interesting opinions that might surprise you. And with the recent release of Scream 7, I thought, why not rank and go through my favorite Scream movies from best to worst? And in the process, answer the big question: where does Scream 7 fit into this list? We're about to find out. Let's get this list started. Scream 1. Okay, of course this is the best Scream movie. Everyone knows that. But what people don't know is that this wasn't just a good horror movie, but it came at a time when slashers were going out of style. Hollywood had milked them dry for so long that people weren't turning up for them anymore, to the point that the studios threw in the towel and were forced to wrap them up with final installments.
Freddy's dead.
And just when the slasher movie seemed like it reached its end, Wes Craven came in and made Scream, a movie that revitalized the slasher genre. It introduced a new style of horror with the killer talking to his victims over the phone, and it was also very self-aware. It made fun of those tired old horror films whilst also celebrating them. It also broke the rules of the slasher film. Masked slashers usually didn't speak because it would compromise their horrifying presence, but Scream broke that rule and gave the killer a friendly but simultaneously chilling voice.
What?
To see what your insides look like.
This performance is brought to you by Mojo Jojo.
1 egg left! But for a nutritious breakfast, 2 eggs is the minimum requirement, and I have but 1, which is one shy of 2. And it is 2 that I need. Curses.
The impressive thing about this voice is that it rides the line of being incredibly charming and shit your pants scary.
Scary night, isn't it? With the murders and all, it's like right out of a horror movie or something. If you hang up on me, you'll die just like your mother.
We then have the characters, and all of them are so memorable. Sydney, Dewey, Gail, Randy, Billy, Stu, Tatum, and even Casey, who we all thought would be the main character. She was in the poster for crying out loud, and she was played by Drew Barrymore, who was a pretty notable name at the time. And Scream, without a doubt, has my favorite horror movie opening of all time. In fact, this opening scene was so intense that it convinced the UK's Film Classification Board to give this movie the highest certificate they had. The scene was also so powerful that it got the executives to get off Wes Craven's back, because originally they didn't have faith in this film, so Wes Craven shot the opening scene first, got the composer Marco Beltrami, who had never composed or even seen a horror movie till this point, to make music for it early. And the studio execs, they loved it, and then they left Wes Craven alone. The MPAA, however, wouldn't get off his back because the film kept getting an NC-17, but that's a separate story. Scream took the slasher movie, revitalized it, and combined it with a whodunit mystery, which has become a staple of the franchise and many other franchises since. This movie was so successful at revitalizing the slasher that when some of the old slashers came back, they tried to model their scares after Scream. The characters are all crazy memorable, the horror sequences are thrilling, the humor is fantastic, the directing is perfect, and it managed to turn this cheapo costume that was in every costume shop into one of the most iconic horror slashers of all time, along with that sexy voice.
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch. If you hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
Yeah, I love this movie. Everyone has talked about it to death, and I can do the same. This is a great horror film, one of the best out there, and to no one's surprise, it is the best Scream movie.
Listen, asshole!
I must immediately purchase some eggs, for I need to have breakfast, and without the eggs I cannot have the breakfast that I so require. Hey, you kids, get out of my moat! It is not made to be played in! I must remember to destroy those kids after my breakfast has been eaten.
Is this some kind of joke?
I have forgotten my wallet! Curses!
Scream 2. Scream 2 is an interesting one, because although it takes the second spot, I thought it had the slowest pacing of the original 4. Now, the opening scene is fantastic, it's incredibly smart and very well built up, and it does a great job of making you care for these two characters, even though one of them is Jada. This sure is an entanglement she'll never forget. And I can't imagine how audiences felt watching this scene in the theater back in the day. It must have been really trippy. My dad actually saw this in the theater when it released and felt very conscious about it too. I mean, there's meta, And then there's this, which I can only imagine would make you feel on guard for the rest of the film. So the scene is great, but it takes about 8 minutes to get to the point, which, for a Scream opening, is quite a while considering how quickly they usually get the horror scene started. And although it works great on first viewing, on multiple viewings, the build-up doesn't have the same impact and it really drags. And as for this scene, I found it very cringy and it always felt like a deleted scene to me. And there are some other scenes in the movie that feel much slower with their pacing too. So Scream 2 definitely felt like the slowest of the original 4 movies to me. With that being said, this movie was still awesome. It furthers the development of the remaining characters, it introduces new likable characters, some really clever ideas where it lets us the audience in on where Ghostface is hiding, and then other scenes where it just pulls the rug out from under you.
Why don't you show your face, you fucking coward?
My pleasure.
The scene with Sydney and her friend trying to exit the car by climbing into the front seat with Ghostface and exiting out through his window with Sydney even trying to take his mask off, this was probably the most on edge I have ever been watching a horror film. Certainly in my top 5, and it was masterfully directed. The killer reveal was pretty lame, and to be honest, I completely forgot who this character was the first time I saw the film, but the second reveal was great. Billy's mother being the killer was such a good idea, although I always found this line to be funny.
You know what makes me sick? I'm sick to death of people saying that it's all the parents' fault. You want to blame someone, why don't you blame your mother?
Am I the only one who finds it funny that she hates it when people say it's the parents' fault, only for her to proceed to telling Sydney that it's her parents' fault? I've always found that funny.
You have turned into such a freak! I love it!
An interesting thing about this movie is that originally, the killers were different. It was supposed to be Derek and Haley, and they both ended up killing Mickey. But the script got leaked, so they did some last-minute rewrites and reshoots, and it ended up being these two instead. Maybe that's why Mickey's reveal felt kind of half-baked. But hey, on my second viewing, I warmed to it. I also heard that Tobey Maguire was originally supposed to play the role of Mickey, but he turned down the role. Imagine what that would have looked like.
Hello, Sydney. Remember me?
What do you want?
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
And am I the only one who found it nerve-wracking that Sydney is running away from Ghostface, and then Derek shows up and moves her into perfect stabbing position? That's something I noticed on my first viewing, and something I still notice and cringe at to this day. But yeah, everyone agrees that this is a solid sequel, and so do I. It's really good. Scream 4. You know, it's funny. The first couple times I saw this film, I thought it was nothing special, and it was mainly due to the movie's very abrupt ending, and the out-of-place credit song didn't help either. But as the years have gone by, I've liked it more and more. Now, it's important to talk about the time frame of when this movie was made. Scream 4 was released at a time when horror movie remakes were running rampant. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all were getting remade. But Wes Craven was the only one at the time who decided to make a horror sequel. So whilst the other franchises were getting terrible remakes, Scream 4 was making fun of remakes. And this was very timely. They also incorporated the internet, which wasn't as big a thing when the previous movies came out.
If there's been another murder in Woodsboro, obviously... What?
That is not public information.
It is all over the internet, Dewey.
It is?
So it was fun to see these characters in this new era. We had a slew of new memorable characters, although I never got why Kirby was such a standout to people, and to this day, I still don't get it. I mean, she was fine, but she didn't stand out from the others in any way, other than she was the last to go. As is tradition with Scream, we had a great opening scene that had multiple opening scenes, including Anna from Frozen stabbing Rogue from X-Men.
Did that surprise you?
It did, actually, although you lose some points for no Ghostface mask, and for sneakily grabbing the knife right over here. These characters were so nice to have back, particularly Neve Campbell and David Arquette, who perfectly slipped back into their roles, and their friendship was so nice to see. And I love how Dewey has a bit of a dismissive greeting with Sydney after years due to a death happening, but then when things calm down, they talk, and it's like watching two best friends reunite. And I even like how he quotes a book back to her, showing that he read it. Gail didn't.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I know where you can get one.
But yeah, this was so nice. More reason as to why I think Gail should have been the one to die in Scream 5. Her and Sydney never had much of a relationship in the first 4 films, but Dewey and Sydney did, and we could have gotten more mileage out of their continued friendship rather than these two's. I mean, they don't even have a friendship. They're more acquaintances.
Sid?
Hi, Gail.
And Dewey is a sheriff now too. This character has really come up in the world. And I like how with each movie, Sydney gets more and more confident with her encounters against Ghostface, and in this movie, she actually fights him. The kills were great and even gorier than the previous films. Seeing the characters return was awesome. Ghostface hadn't lost a beat despite being 15 years. And the killer reveal was cool too. Even though I think Emma Roberts was hamming it up, she needed to bring it down a little. There's an art to the killer revealed trope in Scream, and she didn't quite hit the mark. But she did a much better job in the later scenes. So yeah, over time, I have grown to really like Scream 4. I like the story, I love the characters, I liked the meta remake commentary, I enjoyed the motivations, and it was just nice to see how far the characters had come after all these years. And that's why Scream 4 is my third favorite of the franchise. Scream 3. Now, Scream 3 gets a bad rap, but I think it's massively underrated. Yes, it's not as good as the rest of the Wes Craven Scream films, and it didn't get Kevin Williamson back as the writer, but that doesn't mean it was bad. Let me tell you why I like this movie. First off, the characters. Sydney, Dewey, and Gale are still very likable characters, and they are a main part of the story, and we see their relationships continue. This is the first movie where Gale and Sydney really do become more friendly towards each other. I mean, it's the first movie where she doesn't punch Gale, so progress. And like I said, they are all a main part of the story, as is the killer in the film. Originally, we were supposed to have Stu be the killer who was training a bunch of new killers, but then the Columbine school situation happened and the entire studio had to pivot as a result of this. And that Columbine incident actually affected this movie in much more ways than you probably know. They had to rewrite the killer, they removed most of the blood from the movie with the exception of Cotton's death, which was actually more violent in the alternate opening, and even studios outside the film industry were affected. I mean, the Simpsons wrestling game on PS1 had to scrap an already completed stage outside of Springfield Elementary School just so they wouldn't risk offending anyone. I mean, that's how crazy things had gotten. So Scream 3 was massively affected, but honestly, given the changes they had to make, and on a short time scale, I thought they did a pretty good job. As well as being a whodunit, the movie is also a procedural as they investigate more of Sydney's mother's backstory, and I found the backstory to Sydney's mother really interesting. And the idea that Billy was directed by an unwanted offspring who was not embraced by Sydney's slutty mother was a retcon, but one that I didn't mind, because it didn't change the events in the first movie, but it gave them some added context, in a way that fits the whole film fan lore that these movies operate on, and it brings the trilogy full circle. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you could take it or leave it, but I am happy to take it. The horror commentary is here, this movie is the third in a trilogy, so they get some mileage out of that, although more would have been nice. And the horror in this movie was still really effective to me. They even brought in some ghostly horror elements as well, which was different. Now, I don't like the voice modulator being able to mimic real people's voices. That was going too far. The scenes were still intense, but you want to hear Ghostface talk, not the actors doing an imitation of Ghostface. But that being said, I still found the third movie to be very enjoyable. It had a great opening, which actually killed a major character for the first time. It had memorable enough new characters, especially with Patrick Dempsey playing Mark, and I really enjoyed the climax. And the score for this movie, composed by Marco Beltrami, was great, and I actually think it's his best work in this franchise. But yeah, Scream 3, I think it's underrated. Although it's the weakest of Wes Craven's films, I have no shame in saying that I have always enjoyed it. Scream 6. Yeah, it's not at all surprising that the Scream movies not directed by Wes Craven ended up towards the bottom of this list. The first thing I've got to talk about is that both this and Scream 5 are the only movies in the franchise where people get stabbed so many times and don't die. Jenna Ortega gets stabbed 7 times in the 5th film, and she even gets the finishing slash, and she just ends up in the hospital. And in the 6th movie, she gets a full-on stab in her chest. Only a flesh wound. Mindy got stabbed twice all the way in the 6th movie, and then later she is just running around with a bandage feeling no pain to her internal organs. And this girl got stabbed and then had the knife cut upwards, and she's still moving. And the rest of the characters are like, you can make it. And I was like, what are you talking about? She shouldn't even be standing right now. And how come everything is still in there?
I order you to spill your internal organs right now!
What kind of sick people are you?
And don't get me started on Chad. Yeah, what did these two jokers say again?
Dewey had to die to make it real. Because our movie has fucking stakes!
No, it doesn't. And it's hilarious that they think it does. Chad got stabbed several times in the 5th movie and then gets stabbed dozens of times from 2 ghost faces, and he still survives. To put into perspective how ridiculous this is, even by movie standards, Mortal Kombat used this as a fatality, and if it was enough to convince the Mortal Kombat guys, then it should convince everyone that even in film land, this character would be dead 10 times over. But apparently in Scream 5 and 6, it's just a flesh wound. And that really was ridiculous with these 2 films. This movie is the most violent, but what does it matter if the characters don't die? It just means there are no stakes to these killings anymore. So, with that said, I do like this movie. For one, I thought the reveal was actually pretty good. Granted, it copied Scream 2, but I didn't see it coming, so I thought it was a clever copy and paste. My complaints with Melissa Barrera's acting in Scream 5 have been rectified in this movie, and she does a much better job. And her character was much more engaging this time round. I thought the music was really good, much better than the 5th film, and I was constantly intrigued. Neve Campbell didn't return because the bastards over at Spyglass wouldn't pay her, so Gale is here, and she lives her life like she doesn't give 2 shits that Dewey died. She even has herself a new boy toy. The level of disrespect these guys have towards Dewey is limitless. If the roles were reversed and Gale died in Scream 5, Dewey would still be mourning her, not whatever the heck she is doing. And if Wes Craven was directing, then she definitely would have cared. Yeah, you know what? Someone punch her in the face for me.
Nice try, sweetie. But I've done this dance before.
This doesn't feel true to Wes Craven's portrayal of Gale. It's like she is a completely different character with how little she cares. I did really enjoy her scene though. It was very tense, and she even hung up and called Ghostface back, which was new. And yes, she survives a bunch of stabs too. Now, as I said, Sydney's absence wasn't really felt in the film, surprisingly, and you are invested in the story even without her. But to be honest, hearing Ghostface say,
Hello, Samantha.
just doesn't hold the same iconic weight as him saying,
Hello, Sydney.
We have Kirby back, which I don't care. Like I said, she was a fine character, but I never understood why people got so excited over her. I cared more for Deputy Judy than I did Kirby. And unlike the 5th film, the 6th movie did not feel like fan fiction. The writing felt much more authentic for the most part, the mystery was really engaging, and this is the first movie where I really got used to our 2 new leads. So I did enjoy Scream 6, but there are still a bunch of other stuff I didn't like. I didn't care for the romance between Chad and Tara, and this scene was so stupid. Samantha runs out of bullets, so she runs towards Detective Bailey, only he has a gun. He should have just shot her like she did his daughter. But instead, this detective charges towards her too, throwing off his aim and giving her the edge. That was so dumb. So 6 had a lot of dumb stuff too, but it took the Scream formula and made a fun Scream installment out of it. But those stabs, man, it takes the tension away when characters can get stabbed so many times and still survive in the end if the movie wants them to. Scream 5. Usually people say that Scream 3 is the worst movie in the franchise, but we have a new winner. This is the first Scream movie not to be directed by Wes Craven. But not just that, Kevin Williamson also didn't come back to write it, and Marco Beltrami didn't come back to compose it either. So this is a completely different creative team behind this movie. And for the first half, they do a pretty good job, especially when they bring the original characters back. I even like how they portray Dewey once he gets back into action. Old Hermit aside, I mean, really, Hollywood? Another one? What I didn't like is that much like the Disney Star Wars films, they didn't bring the gang back together. And no, a phone call doesn't fucking count. And although the movie does a pretty good job with Ghostface, it never felt like authentic Ghostface to me. His writing just felt like fan fiction. The same goes for the rest of this movie. This is also the first movie in the franchise to not kill a character in the opening of the film, and there is no way Tara could have survived this. But she does.
How are you feeling? You okay?
I was also not a fan of Melissa Barrera's acting in this movie. She does a much better job in the 6th film. The rest of the characters were decent, but I found them to be the least memorable of the sequels. And then, of course, we have the scene that pissed everyone off. The death of Dewey. This is one of the biggest reasons why Scream 5 is the worst Scream film. The problem is not that they killed Dewey off, It's how they killed him off. For all the smart decisions and assessments he makes in this film, he ends up making every dumb move in the horror movie playbook in these few seconds. And he goes out like a moron when he should have gone out like a hero. Maybe he dies protecting Sydney, or Gale, or both. If you're going to kill a well-known character, then the basics of storytelling dictate that you need to have them die for a reason. Dying to protect Gale makes sense. Dying because she called him does not. I mean, seriously, who wrote this shit? This is what I mean when I say the writing feels like fan fiction. He died for nothing, and even Sydney doesn't act like it's a big deal, which is so out of character for her. She would have been devastated. And to find out that the person who stabbed him with such jock strength ended up being skinny little Amber, that was ludicrous. And there was no way she could stab him like this after being knocked out with 3 close-up shots to the chest, even with a bulletproof vest. Not to mention, it's so obviously a dude in this costume, and this made her reveal feel like a cheat. And you can add Dewey to the pile of legacy male characters that Hollywood was killing off in completely forced and disrespectful ways. This girl power shot was not done by accident, and Dewey got in the way of that, so they got rid of him. That is one of the reasons I do not trust these directors with the 4th Mummy movie, and I think that they are going to kill Jonathan off in an equally stupid way. I'm predicting it right now. And for the handful of people who think I'm overreacting, guess what? Nev Campbell doesn't like Dewey's death either.
Dewey's death. I'm not happy about it. Nobody was happy about Dewey's death. Yes, Randy's death was heartbreaking, but we hadn't had him long enough. We'd had Dewey for so long that I think it hurt just that little bit more.
Dewey. He shouldn't have died. I think that was a mistake.
Now that is reason alone to make this the worst Scream movie, because the movie has lost me. At this point, I'm just watching a stupid movie that I don't care about anymore. But it's not the only reason it's the worst. Whereas the first half of the film was fun and really interesting and felt relatively new, the second half just felt like I was rewatching the first movie again, but with far inferior characters. Now at times there was fun to be had, but it just started to feel the most unoriginal of the sequels. Even the setup when the killers are revealed felt like a complete retread, and not in a good way. And when you combine the unoriginality with the frustrating weight of Dewey's unsatisfactory demise, it went from being a good sequel to a lazy one. And the acting from the killers revealed was so cringy, especially from Amber here.
How bad can she be?
I mean, it's a small town and your mom's a drunk.
Can't have a bona fide Halloween without Jamie Lee.
Oh, that bad.
This is like Emma Roberts times 10 with how over the top their performances are. Also, I think the deaths for these two should have been reversed, especially considering that Amber did all the killing. She deserved to have it way worse than he did, especially for killing Dewey. Her death was way too merciful. I feel that these guys wanted to get rid of the only real male character from the original so the women could be badasses. Think about it. They took everything that made Dewey successful in life and turned him into a failure. His career, his respect from the town and the Woodsboro Police Department, his marriage, even his hygiene, all gone. Now he's just reduced to wandering around his apartment, eating out-of-date food, and watching his ex-wife on TV. They diminished him and then killed him off, where he died alone without any of his loved ones around him. They took away his dignity right till the very end. So I genuinely feel that they wanted to get rid of him so they could make the female characters take the lead, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And then they have the nerve to say, for Wes. I don't think Wes Craven would have approved of you killing Dewey like that, a character he kept alive for multiple movies and even made into a sheriff. He was building him up, and these guys tore him down in half a movie. Scream 5 is the only movie in the franchise that left a foul taste in my mouth. The fanfiction feel, the mediocre lead, a good first half but weak second half, a terrible killer reveal, a misguided and pointless death for a beloved character, and a backhanded tribute to the original director. All of this and more will forever cement this film as the worst Scream movie to me. That is... until Scream 7 was made. Yes, my friends, it pains me to say it, but even after my long rant on Scream 5, Scream 7 is the worst Scream movie of the entire franchise. And this film really tried to sell us on the original people coming back. They brought the original writer, Kevin Williamson, back, and he's directing this time too. We had the original composer, Marco Beltrami, return, and we also had Sydney as the main character again. We had Gale, we got Mark back, at least we would have, but Spyglass didn't pay him what he was worth, and he declined.
corpse.
And they also told us that Stu Macher was coming back, even though that is something that studios would usually keep secret. But they told us before they even started shooting the film. This really showed me how desperate the studio was after the insane backlash they got for firing Melissa Barrera for supporting Gaza. Not only that, but the backlash only got bigger when one day later, Jenna Ortega left in solidarity with her on-screen sister. And that is something the studio didn't see coming. So much so that they lied by saying Jenna Ortega had scheduling conflicts. Only the gullible believed that, as later Jenna confirmed what we already knew, that she did leave because they fired Melissa. So suddenly announcing that they are bringing all these original people back, even spoiling Stu's return, just smacked of desperation. Because they had a perfectly working franchise, but then they ruined it all by themselves. And this mess of a movie is a direct result of Spyglass's bullshit. First of all, the opening sequence was spoiled too much in the trailer, and I think there was a good idea here, but it was too small scale, and the direction was not as good as it could have been. There was also no reason for the opening deaths to happen. It didn't connect to the overall story, and it was never brought up again. It was just done out of tradition because that's what the Scream movies do, except there's usually a reason why they do it. And there were no recognizable actors in these roles either, and the boyfriend was just a dick. It was an okay opening, but easily the worst and most disposable of the franchise. And you could have cut it and lost nothing. Sydney is back and we see what kind of life she leads away from Woodsboro, and I like what I saw, but there was just this constant feeling of emptiness when she's away from Woodsboro. Also, this is the first movie to have Sydney as the lead and to not have Dewey call her when Ghostface shows up. And you really feel his absence, and it makes the movie just feel depressingly empty, like our legacy characters are back, but feel incomplete, and this just further proves that they made a big mistake to kill him off. Gail was here, and she didn't even need to be. You could have written her out, and it wouldn't have made any difference. The only reason Gail is in this movie is because Dewey couldn't be in it, and they had to reunite whatever characters were left with Sydney. And it's sad that it feels that way, because if the trio had returned, then it would have at least felt like they were on another journey together, and the movie would have been cooler. Throw in Mark from Scream 3 and we could have really had a party here. But we didn't get that. Dewey is dead, and Mark is replaced with another Mark, played by the banker in Spider-Man 2. Talk about cheap. And I feel like they were trying to make him a Dewey replacement as the one looking out for Sydney, but it's just not possible to replace Dewey. And I didn't like this guy. He had no on-screen presence and he didn't fit with these characters. Patrick Dempsey really would have brought in a much needed charisma to this role, and it would have meant something to see a character we had already met be Sydney's husband. So Spyglass should have opened their wallets and brought him back. And Isabel May just doesn't look like Sydney's daughter. Her character doesn't have much going for her except being mad at her mum for naming her after her dead best friend, as well as the fact that Sydney won't answer any of her questions about her traumatizing past. Going back to her not looking like Sydney's daughter, I think they just tried to hire a pretty girl because she doesn't really have that much else going for her, sadly, and the same goes for most of the characters in this film. There was a lot of nostalgia bait in this movie too, and it's all because they fired Melissa Barrera, and they're really trying to win us back by saying, look, Stu is back. Look, Mark is back. Oh, no, wait, no, he isn't. Let's quote the first Scream movie back to you. Even though the characters are quoting Stab 1, but to you, they're quoting Scream 1. For all this talk about the original writer returning for this movie, it just goes to show that he wasn't the only one that made these movies successful. It was Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson that made these movies what they are. They were a great team, and Scream 4 was proof of that. The band got back together, they were thrown back into the world of Woodsboro after being away from it for over a decade, and in that time, the discussion surrounding horror had changed significantly. And without warning, the characters were thrown right back into it and had to catch up with all the latest horror movie trends. And it really felt like you had these iconic characters pulled back into the line of danger again. But with no Dewey, no Woodsboro, and Gail and Sydney leading the charge with Sydney's new daughter, it just feels like a very lame and soulless lineup. And for all the emphasis on nostalgia, it doesn't bring back Mark, the one piece of nostalgia that actually would have been good. And the big reveal and justification for why the killer is here was complete nonsense. And as for Ghostface himself, he is like a frickin' Terminator in this movie. They hit him so many times as hard as they can, and he keeps getting back up. It actually got frustrating at a point, because usually Ghostface can get knocked out in these movies. It shows that he's human, but not here. He might as well have been Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, even though the whole appeal of Ghostface is that he isn't one of those supernatural killers. He's more of a grounded and vulnerable killer. Ghostface doesn't talk much in this movie either. In fact, he probably talks the least in this movie than any other, and that's a huge problem. Ghostface isn't just an iconic look, he's just as much an iconic voice. That's what separates Ghostface from other mask slashers. He actually talks, and to minimize the use of his voice was a big mistake. And there were plenty of silent scenes where Ghostface was gesturing with his knife or staring at people, and they could have ADR'd some Ghostface dialogue here, but they didn't. What a shame. Now, the movie was not devoid of any good stuff. The Ghostface sequences were still a lot of fun, as you would expect. I was never scared, but I was super entertained and had an adrenaline rush watching it the entire time, and there were a good amount of creative set pieces too. Sidney even does something to Ghostface's knife at one point, and that was both clever and funny. And then Ghostface comes back with something even worse. So the dark humor in this movie was good. I found the movie to be very intense, and I had a lot of fun with all the scares. Something that I have always loved about the Scream movies is how the sequels continue to update how the killer interacts with our main characters via technology. First it was home phones, then it was cell phones, then the internet, text messages, security systems, and I won't spoil how the killer communicates here, but it was pretty clever and very timely. The violence in this movie was also cool, but not as violent as some of the previous installments. It wasn't goreless, but it didn't have as much as I thought it would. The movie also addresses Gale's sadness for Dewey, and she acknowledged him for once, so I liked that they put that emphasis there. I still would have liked some grief for Dewey from Sidney though, and this is the first time I actually liked Randy's nephew and niece. Gale hires them as her interns, and that was a very smart way to utilize them, and there is some good comedy here as well. So as you can see, there are a good amount of positive things about Scream 7. But then the ending happened, and that completely screwed this movie. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that no one will be satisfied with the ending here. In addition to all the other problems I listed, the film also has the most forgettable lineup of side characters in the entire franchise, and you don't care if any of them die, and they are not given enough development. I mean, Kevin Williamson has distributed time between characters very well before, so I don't know why he couldn't do it here. This whole movie proves that Kevin Williamson is not enough. You need Wes Craven as well. Both of them made the Scream movies as successful and iconic as they are, and the two times they didn't have each other, it has resulted in both of their weaker movies. And Marco Beltrami reprises his role as composer, but this is easily the worst of his work in the franchise. And the town was shockingly empty in one scene when Tatum was running away from Ghostface screaming for help. No one was there. It looks like the town had been abandoned. I mean, seriously, Spyglass was so cheap they couldn't pay for any extras. Overall, this was an incredibly disappointing Scream movie. There were so many theories that people had as to what this movie could have been about. Even me and my brother were discussing theories, and I think there are far superior angles they could have went with this story, but just didn't. This movie felt like it was written very quickly, and it needed much more time. My score for the movie would have been higher, but then the ending happened and it completely pulled a rug out from under it, and made me question why this movie was made in the first place. So Scream 7 gets a 4 out of 10. I thought this movie would potentially be at the bottom of the list, but I didn't think it would be at the end. That is the biggest twist since Billy and Stu were revealed to be the killers. So that is my list. It's also worth pointing out that Scream 1 is more than just my favorite Scream movie, it's my favorite horror movie of all time. And although the sequels aren't able to compete, they do a pretty good job all things considered. Because really, there is no reason for other killers to dress as Ghostface. Billy and Stu did it because they're psychotic movie fans, but everyone else, they could have gotten their revenge in a much less complicated way, especially the cop in Scream 6. I mean, geez, the lengths they had to go. They could have just killed Samantha and been done with it. So Scream 1 is still considered the best by pretty much everyone. It's the movies that were not directed by Wes Craven that start to fall off for me, and they don't take as good care of the characters as he did. So you know my list. Now in the comments, let me know yours. I'll be reading each and every single one of them. As always, a huge thanks to my lovely patrons who support what I do. Recently, my Charles Playing King Kong Versus videos got copyright claimed, and those are just recent examples. They've been claiming other Versus videos too. So the support over on Patreon does help a great deal, and I really appreciate it. If you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell right next to it, as well as the like and hype button. And I will catch all of you very soon. Take care.